Okay, so here we are on Octane. See, it might look a bit confusing, but it's not confusing at all. So just break down the several parts here. So here we have our render targets. I'll make one render target for each different camera angle. You can do that multiple different ways. You can also just pop out the camera setting and add a new camera for every target. That you can also for every different angle, that you can do that as well. But it all feeds into the geometry group, which you can get under here, geometry group. That's where all the different pieces that I saved out, the corridor, the character, the alarm system, the light up spheres, how everything comes together. I'll click on here, I'll make several inputs, and then I can put everything together. So I have, here's the corridor with all its materials. Don't need to care about that right now. Also, I go out, set a placement node and feed it into a different slot. So I have another instance of that corridor, which I then, with the placement node, turn around by 180 degrees. If you see here in the y-axis, I turn it around by 180 degrees and just translate it into position so it fits exactly. Here we have the alarm system. So I just did it that way. It feeds, so here we have here it feeds into the group, and with this one here. So here we have the FBX. It goes into a placement node so that I can push the alarm system, can push these little blocks, can I push up and down, and then they go, and I have another one because again I have two, let's remember I have two corridors, so I need also two alarm systems, but then I want to move them at the same time, and in order to do that, there's two different objects now, two different instances, right? And I want to move them at the same time. So I feed them into a different geometry group and into another placement node. So now if I use this placement node, I can move them together up and down. Here's my spaceman. Again, placement node directly in there. This is nothing much. It's just a couple of LiveDB materials. That's not really part of this tutorial. It's just like some plastic, some skin material, glass, and some other stuff. And there's nothing really fancy in there. That's the lady character I've had in there, but I don't need that. I experimented with some fog, but that's not really necessary either. It's gonna really have a big impact on your render times. And for this kind of stuff, maybe it's easier to just not disregard the fog completely. You know, I haven't connected it, so we don't need it. Here is the spheres, which I'm lighting up using a texture. So diffuse material texture emission and then the image. We'll get to that later. I want to connect it or disconnect it however I want. So I'm going to plug that in here. I don't need to move it, so I don't need a placement node. If we look at the alarm system, there is a couple of materials, of course. There's the overall material for the object that is the same as the wall material. That's why I call what's called walls. There is the what I called alarm, and then just a basic material with a black body emission, either set to green for the regular state or red for the alarm state. So I'll just connect these whatever I need. There is a white lighting, for which I'm using a texture emission, then an IES light. I think those render a bit faster. IES is like a file for actual lights, which you can download. There's so many you can download. Even like light bulb manufacturers offer these to see the exact lighting pattern that their light bulbs give out. So you can find so many of these online. And I feel like they render a bit faster than the black body emissions, but they're always white. So You can play around maybe with the temperature for these. Oh no, sorry, the texture emission does not have a temperature indicator. Here with the black body emission, you can ramp up the temperature and make it warmer or cooler. But I feel like these ones, they're a bit faster. So usually for white lights, I use these kind of guys. So that one feeds into the white light indicator slot, and same as over here in the corridor. So these two share, of course, the wall material and this white light material. So I'll turn it on and let it render a bit, and then I'll explain a bit more. So these are all just different camera angles, but let's see what we did here. So it's the interior lighting with all the texture emissions makes the rendering quite slow, so you got to be careful. I have two 1080 Ti and it's really getting quite slow at times. So what do we have here? So as you can see, this is how I currently lit it. So first the non lights. So for the ground here, for the entire materials on the walls and everything, there's a couple of them. So the main material is consists of a couple of textures here. If I dive into it, so it's a mixed material based on a diffuse and a glossy material. I'm feeding in a triplanar map, which means that for every axis I can use a different map. So there's the axis X, Y, and Z, and each of them have a positive and a negative slot. Positive meaning the one that is facing upward, and negative means the one facing downward. So even if they're on the same axis, I can actually give this part and this part a different texture, which is very nice. So if you see here, which one is that? Let's go to the Y. So yeah, you see even for the Y axis, I'm using two different materials. So this one slots into the diffuse material diffuse channel. I use box mapping for everything. There's no UVs or anything. So left and right left, like everything that is basically vertical has its own, uses the same, and everything that is up and down uses a different one. So that's why I'm able to get different graphic breakups with just one texture. So I'm using the same kind of texture here, but I'm getting all these different results by pushing and getting this like painted look with like different parts are being painted without having to do any UVs, without anything. It takes a bit of trial and error to get this exactly to the way you want, but it's quite powerful if you use like a graphic piece of texture and overlay it. So we have the diffuse material. There's a different there's a dirt mask in the roughness channel for both. That gives me these like dirty areas here. There is my favorite texture, the kind of this like tiling texture that is plugged into the normal channel to give me a bit of bump here without using any of the color information. So you see it has these like parcels here of textures that kind of gives it like another tiled look in addition to these bigger breakups. So this serves as like a third level of breakup. We see that our textures here, our geometry works quite well to give us the horizontal breakups. I also have a mixed texture in the amount so that I can choose how it's getting blended between the diffuse and the glossy material. the mixed texture because I have two different kinds of textures I want to feed into it. And that way this works. This one you can play around with in the file itself, so you can explore. I don't want to get too much into it. I want to focus more on the lighting. So we'll get out of here. There's a couple of standard materials like the darker parts, these kind of parts here. They have just like a drag and drop, like metal, some plastic, lighter plastic, darker plastic, old plastic. So this one here, this red one, is like a translucent plastic material, just drag and drop from the LiveDB, which is really quite interesting and gives it another, like it gives it more interest points. And then up here, I just have lots and lots of like emissions in terms of the lighting. So we have the green lighting up here, which feeds into the alarm system. We have, like, that's why we have so many different lights, so we can control everything individually. We have like a regular light that's for the outside. We have the cool lighting, which I called cool, but it's coming from above here. We can control that. We have the glass here, is drag and drop. We have the screens, which are up here. Again, it's just a black body emission, nothing fancy. I'm plugging the same kind of, by the way, I'm plugging the same kind of texture into the texture emission everywhere. It's nothing different. There's the lines here on the side, which really brighten up the room a lot. What else do we have here? Like, we have just like some markings, which in the end you didn't really end up seeing, so it doesn't matter. So this all constitutes our lighting setup for here. You see like the lights coming up from down here, lights up our character because I placed him directly under it. Let me try to move it a bit. It takes a lot of time to resolve because it's quite slow, so please bear with me. But so you can see a bit more of what's going on here. So you can see we have the character here being lit from above quite strongly. You can see our light sources up here. There's a blue light from the screen lighting up this space here. Let's resolve a bit. So this is the first kind of lighting scenario that I chose. It's pretty standard. It's a bit on the darker side. I chose somewhat of a almost like concrete looking painted kind of material. So we can imagine that this is maybe like a futuristic underground bunker or something. Of course, the space suit is kind of misplaced in that kind of scenario. But we could imagine this is the kind of place, or like some kind of like really like a space station or something that is more like a permanent base rather than something that is constructed temporarily maybe. So you see also the lights that are coming through here that we made under the panels is coming out in areas, which is quite nice, just as we wanted. Of course, I'm not doing this and then it's like all done without any hitches and without any problems, right? I go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I load it in here and see what works, and then I go back and fix it, and then I come back here and see if it works, and then I add more, I add less. I see whatever works best, right? So it's a back and forth, a constant back and forth. And just for the purposes of this video, it looks fairly streamlined. So don't get fooled by that. So this is one of the lighting scenarios, as I mentioned, right? But of course, we can have completely different ones. So one way in how we can influence the lighting entirely by the material is, I want to show that to you now. So I have like a more whitish, light, very reflective material that I want to plug into the walls. And we'll see how that changes pretty much everything. And I also want to plug that into the doors. And now really without changing anything else, without changing anything in the lights at all, we're able to get this like super reflective, very clean look. And it's contributed by the fact that we have a lot of reflections, a lot of lights that are bouncing everywhere, and it gives us a feel that this corridor is a lot bigger than it actually is. So you can see how the just purely by selecting a different material, the room, the character of this is a lot different. Oh, by the way, and in case you're interested in the camera settings, so I set it to 20 millimeter camera. It's a very confined space, and so in order to show a lot, I wanted to make it really wide angle. The f-stop I just set something ridiculously high, so I don't have any depth of field in most of the shots, so everything is sharp. What I did is that I added a lot of distortion for the camera to get kind of like a borderline fisheye effect. It feels a bit more natural than the super straight view without. So that when you actually use a wider lens in your camera, unless it's a very expensive lens, you tend to start having barrel distortions that are kind of warping your field of view a little bit, which is actually in this case quite nice, because at the edges especially you get like a bit of a curvature. We're going to see that later in the final frames. And the rest is all pretty the usual stuff. There's nothing really changed. So we're letting this resolve a little bit. So we're getting quite an interesting look here. Let me zoom out a little bit. So that's pretty cool. Again, it's using the same kind of lighting, but just a different wall material. So now what we can also do is change the lighting itself to something very different. So in order to do that, I will need to disable a few things. So I don't want to have my main lighting anymore. So I take that out. I want to turn on my emergency lighting from below. So now below here is like all red lights. I want to turn off my... Sorry, I need to look for the exact node. No, that's what I need. This one I need to disconnect the lights on the side here. I want to change my alarm lighting to red. And I can also change the exterior lighting to something more red. So now if I let this resolve a little bit, you can see how we have a very moody, a very different kind of... You move a bit away from the blue. Let's let it resolve a little bit. So now we have a very different kind of feeling to it. So if I want to move my emergency lighting out a bit, I can do that. You can see how it's coming out. So we can simulate that idea. Of course, if you have more cards, then this will go a lot faster. If you have only maybe one graphic card or something not so fast, then maybe it'll be a bit tricky. So you have to really see where you can, how you can get a good performance versus look out of it, and Or you can also choose to do it in something like Eevee, which will probably work a little bit better, a little bit faster. So you see how we get like multiple reflections in all directions, lights bouncing off and creating this really interesting like light tunnel. And this is where it's like with all these reflections, it's helpful if the design is not too it's not too noisy everywhere, for it to really play the lighting game here really well. You see even the screen is being reflected in so many angles. So you get the idea of how we can change the entire lighting system to look a lot different without having to change any of the lights that we have in here. Like they're all the same. I don't move them or anything. I just plug in a different kind of color temperature. I turn on different lights. I turn off certain lights, and we're getting a very different result to before. So maybe we can do another different scenario. Now I need to see which ones we need to turn off and turn on. Move these in a little bit. So now we have like a very dark kind of feel to it. Maybe I'll turn also this one off. I want to have it very dark and very moody. So now that's where I'm going to plug in the extra sphere I made, so that I actually have the main lighting coming out from the two sides. And let's get some of the pipes in the frame. And I want to have everything pretty dark, but only the light coming from the side. So that's again a very different lighting scenario. And again, I can choose to have it like reflective like this. I can also plug in my previous walls that are less reflective. And it's kind of nice to have the character lit from left and right. It makes it very mysterious. And quite moody. So again, a very different lighting scenario that we can purely achieve by changing the values and doing a little bit of planning beforehand to exactly where we're going to put our lights and what kind of options we can explore. And very nice reflections on the pipes here. So you see, it's just a combination of just emissions and some drag and drop materials. The main work was actually in getting this custom shader for the walls to work properly, but that's really all there is. And you see, even with the regular drag and drop material, from like a really like bright, like it's like a really whitish plastic kind of thing, you get some really cool stuff. You plug in some dirt maps for the roughness channel or specularity, and then you get some additional levels of finesse. So this is what we have done now in Octane. So now I want to bring some of these things in Photoshop and show you how we can use some of the different passes to our advantage to enhance these shots. So as usual, I have the reflection pass, the Z depth pass, and the material ID to quickly cut things out, to play with the depth, to play with reflections, to enhance certain areas. So let's stop this for now. Make sure we save, and we'll jump into Photoshop.